Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some ideas with you. It's a real delight to be here because action research has been most of my life in education since I started at the University of Bath in 1973. So what I've got to bring to you, you must remember, has got that 40-year history. So I'll show you the resources that we've gathered on the web from teachers in schools working to improve their practice. But you must remember that kind of time scale. This is not an easy or a short-term solution. It does actually take years to develop the action research programs and especially the accreditation of the teachers. So I'm very pleased to be here just to share ideas with you. And I'll show you where you can access a lot of free resources about action research, improving learning in schools with pupils, how teachers have got their whole master's degrees and their doctorates from bringing the knowledge, for example, that is in this room in practice, from bringing your knowledge into the universities for their master's and doctoral degrees to enhance professionalism. Now, usually with my keynotes, what I do is just, if I've got to say 40 minutes, I usually just allow a few minutes at the beginning just to see if any members of the audience have come with any questions or issues that they feel they would like addressed during the keynote. Because I often find that people learn most when they've actually got a question that they want to find the answer to. So I'll just pause and just see if there's anyone in the room that has got any issue or question that they're feeling they want to be addressed within the keynote. So is there anybody that would like to just make that contribution now? I'll just give you a minute or two before I go into my own address. Now, this silence doesn't surprise me. I last gave a keynote in Patras 16 years ago. And the audience were used to being talked at for some hours at a time. Now, in action research, it's very important to change this kind of context. The idea that I have all the knowledge which you're just going to take in is not part of action research. Action research depends on you creating your own questions, often of the kind, how do I improve what I am doing? And then engaging in dialogue with others and exciting conversations where you bring your knowledge to others to share it and into the universities for accreditation. So by giving you that moment to say, have you come with any questions or issues? And receiving your silence says a lot about the passivity of a lot of the kind of knowledge transmission within this context. And that is the very first point that I had to face in 1973 at the University of Bath when I started. The teachers were expecting me to tell them and transmit knowledge, whereas I was much more interested as an action researcher in the knowledge that the teachers had with their pupils as they improved the learning. So that is a very important issue here in terms of your questions, your creative and active involvement with the actual process. Now, I'll quickly go through to show you the resources I brought to you, because all I hope to do in this 40 minutes is stimulate you to go to look at the resources that are freely available for you. Because they've come from teachers that I've worked with, as I say, over those 40 years, and certainly over the last 16 years at the University of Bath, 32 of the practitioner researchers have got their doctorates for actually looking at their own practice, inquiring into it, and looking at the learning with their pupils. Now, in Cyprus, I believe that you've actually only recently started to develop the professional development of teachers. Just say if I'm right here, because your present context seems to be one in which you're only just beginning to formalise continuing professional development. That up to now, and this is the order in which I'll try to go through the resources, I'll just look at present context, but I want to focus on what might be involved in you creating a master's educators of Cyprus, a master's profession in Cyprus from your own work. And I'll suggest how you might do this in terms of action research, and in particular this idea that each one of you can contribute what I call your own living theory to the knowledge base of education. And your own living theory is your explanation of your educational influence in your own learning, in the learning of pupils, and perhaps most importantly, in the learning of the social formation in which you're living and working. And it's great to have the ministry represented here, because to do this work, you will need to get the real support of systems supports, often from ministries of education, to promote not only the action research, which is often a technical thing to improve practice, but also to bring your knowledge in this room. I call it the embodied knowledge of educators into the universities, like the University of Cyprus, to be accredited as master educators and doctor educators. But you have a long way to go, clearly, before that is established. But this is your present context, I think, and I want to then go into this point here, number 3, about spreading the influence of your living theory research with digital communications. I'll show you here how you can access all of the teachers' work and their inquiries on the web. But as far as I understand, this is your present context, which is mainly informal, individual, voluntary, and is not yet involved into structured practices. Now, this point about educational reform, it seems that you're now, with the help of the colleagues from the University of Exeter, developing a joint project where you can engage in the shift to school-based professional development. And that is, it seems to me, to be where you are at the moment in terms of your practice. So I think I'm right, and you can check the validity of what I'm saying now, because this is very important for what I say to make it relevant to you. That at the moment, I don't believe that the knowledge in this room that you have as practitioners, this idea of what I call your embodied knowledge, the knowledge that I'm actually expressing in the here and now, as I come after years of practice of giving these kinds of communications, so I'm carrying with me and expressing a large amount of embodied knowledge, which in my research I've made public. I've got my own doctorate for it from the University of Bath, but I'm saying that I don't think at the moment that you've got the accrediting and regulating bodies, and this is where the ministry could be very, very important, supported by the university, to actually accredit your embodied knowledge as educators. So this is what I actually want to focus on, this idea of your knowledge, which you can make public through action research, creating your living theories, is what I think I can bring to you to have a look at. Now, I want to show you, and please don't hesitate, if you feel I am not being clear, or there is something that you're feeling, yes, I want to ask this question, don't hesitate to ask, because you will need to change the very pedagogy that I think you're used to enable interaction and dialogue to take place. And this context is not, we say, conducive to that educational process. So if you can feel that confidence and get over the initial nerves, interrupt me. It's not impolite, it's actually expressing a genuine question and concern. And this will change the pedagogy in the room, which is very important indeed for educational dialogue. Not easy, but really vital. Yes, Yasmina.
Sorry, it's okay.
No, please.
Anyway, no, I think that to talk about certification of informal learning, informal knowledge, that's quite challenging in itself. Now, I know there's a lot of conversation lately within the European Commission context about accrediting informal knowledge, and I am wondering whether this is what you're referring to by mentioning accreditation of embodied knowledge.
Yeah. It is that if you, for example, you go into my slides, and what you'll see is I'll just see if I can just move to, see if I can bring you up. The embodied knowledge has actually been accredited. Now, this one here, and again we're linked into the internet, so this is something that you should actually be able to access for yourselves. And I'll just see if I can actually increase the size of this so you can actually see it. But, that's a shame. Now, all of these here, you'll see, I'll just go down some of them, but you can access freely by going into my slideshow, clicking on that live URL, and this is coming up from the internet. Now, I don't know if the gentleman that can help me just to enlarge this, but if it could, I could show you all these titles. Now, this is the informal knowledge, the embodied knowledge of you as educators that have been awarded their master's units and dissertations from the University of Bath. Now, just listen very carefully to these questions. How have I come to recognise and develop my talents, which are my gifts? How am I using my own understanding and development of gifts and talents? Now, you've got here about 6 modules, units for masters, all of the embodied knowledge of teachers that have been brought into the university for accreditation for their master's degrees. But look at the nature of the question. Academics in England found it very difficult to accept, when I first began, that you could have I in the title of an educational research question. Even when I became president of the British Educational Research Association in 1988, a lot of universities would still ask for a title, how can I improve my practice, to be sent back. Until it was a general question of the kind, how do teachers do this? How can head teachers do it? Do you see what I'm meaning? That the I, the actual embodied I, was removed from the research question. You'll see that most of these now actually have got the embodied I in the question. That's fine. Yeah, thanks. It was just this. If you look at this, how have I improved my practice and developed my living theory? So this is very important indeed, that you see that you can still ask the general questions, but the actual nature of the question that you're asking, I believe, will be of this kind. Now, you've got a range of different modules here. Educational inquiry accounts. How can I contribute to improving the emotional self-regulation of students with whom I work in the context of a special school? So when you ask me to ask about how do you accredit the embodied knowledge or the informal knowledge of the teacher, I talk about that as the embodied knowledge of the educator. It's the knowledge that you already have daily in your practice, that you will be able to bring into the university through the action research. And on this website, you'll see on the PowerPoint slide, you can click and bring up the action research planner we use, which is all about putting down the concern you've got based on your values. How do I improve my practice? Imagining what to do in an action plan. Acting and gathering data to see can you be effective in what you're doing. And then evaluating your effectiveness in terms of your values and understandings, an action reflection plan. Now, all of that is accessible from these resources from my website. And what I always do with the keynotes is put my keynotes, a paper I produce, plus a PowerPoint, and then a video of the actual presentation. So you can access that from the What's New section of actionresearch.net. So after this session, I do hope it will stimulate you to go into those resources, because they've built up, as I say, over many years of teacher research, of teachers like yourselves, of head teachers inquiring into their practice, and putting their master's degrees freely available on the web for other teachers around the world. And on May the 8th, I'm in Toronto at the Action Research Network of the Americas, where we're bringing together all of the, what we call living posters from all over the world of practitioners that are coming into the town hall meeting we've organised to actually show what it is they're doing. And there's no reason at all why, if Yasmina and some other people here want to put in a poster for that meeting of action research showing what you have been doing as educators in Cyprus and the UK, we would be able to bring that living poster into the Action Research Network of the Americas to show not only in North and South America what is going on in Cyprus, but you'll see that I've got groups and individuals working in India, in China, in Australia, in especially Africa. This fantastic group from Africa sent in their living posters. But you could share some of the values and insights you have with action researchers around the world in creating your networks. And from my PowerPoint at the end, I've given you the live URL to show you where we've got this living poster session to if you wish to contribute. So I hope I'm being clear there in terms of what it is you could contribute through your action research to the international communities that are using this approach to improve schools and their practice. Now, again, I'll just pause, expecting complete silence, but if there is anything, and that was a good one from Yasmina, you feel you would like to ask, please do, because it does change the pedagogy in a space, if you feel you're being taken seriously. I think it's wonderful. You know, I mean, it was in Greece where I usually, after time, an embarrassed silence, people start to contribute. Greece was the only country where people would sit, and I got a great tolerance of silence, but for about 6 minutes, people would sit in silence. You know, other people around the world, they can't stand attention. They've got to contribute. So I think you might find in Cyprus, you will have to really work at this participation to get over the dominance of the academic. You know, here am I, you know, I have the knowledge, you're here to passively listen and take it in. Yeah? Now, actually, that's the Greek theory of knowledge. You know, it does come with a lot of that kind of transmission mode, rather than the dialogic. And I think this could be, although I'll guarantee when you leave this room, you'll be chatting to each other, there'll be a life and a buzz of conversation. We need to bring this into our educational research. But this is where you can access all of the teachers' inquiries showing that this is what they've done in their schools. And in my keynote, as I say, you'll see a lot of the work that I've done actually is in schools with teachers, and you'll be able to access this from this PowerPoint slide that I've got for you. As it comes up here, again, this one here, improving schools with action research and living theory, that takes you through all of the context of my PowerPoint slide. But the main thing to remember is that this PowerPoint slide is backed up with a whole website, which, again, if I can just get through to it, is there something that can just get me back into my website? Or is it, would you mind? Yeah? The website I've got has got all my resources, and I can show you how through actionresearch.net. Could you just get me back into the website next time? That you've got here an accumulation of literally, as I say, these 40 years of professional commitment. Now, is it possible the website? Actionresearch.net. So you'll then get not only this presentation with the video and the slides, but also this. So this is actionresearch.net. Thanks very much. And it contains literally all of the work I've been doing at the University of Bath and now at the University of Cumbria in terms of doing what Yasmina asked, which is how do you bring that, my language, your embodied knowledge as educators into the universities for accreditation, to demonstrate that you have the embodied knowledge of the master educator and gradually for the doctor educator. But I would stick with this idea of creating master educators of Cyprus at the moment, because the ministry could provide support for you to get the time for inquiry, and also the universities will need to move away from this transmission mode, although traditional theories are important, but they will have to recognise the power of your knowledge as educators in the universities as legitimate knowledge. That's why I wanted to get, as I say, over 32 PhDs, which I supervised for the last 16 years at the University of Bath, because I wanted to demonstrate that you as educators could get their doctoral degrees, not just for the traditional theoretical knowledge, but for the knowledge that you are expressing with your pupils in the classroom, or as a head teacher with your staff, or as administrator, because one of my PhD students was superintendent of schools in Canada. She was called Jackie DeLong, and her doctorate, you'll see it referenced in my notes for this keynote, showed how to get a whole system supporting the action research and the living theories of educators to improve practice in schools. But again, that was the last 16 years of my time at the University of Bath, determined to bring your knowledge, the knowledge that you have, into the universities for accreditation, which is back on what Yasmina was saying about the informal knowledge. I tend to say the embodied knowledge of the educators, but I think it is the same thing. And this is the website I do hope you will all access, because you'll be able to access this Educational Journal of Living Theories. Now, this began in 2008 as a multimedia text to actually bring the knowledge of your living theories into an international refereed journal. And you'll see that if you wanted to access all of the things like the current issue, the archive, the published papers, you can actually go into these issues and actually find what it is that you're actually wanting to look at in terms of this Journal of Living Theories. So, you've got a dedication. There's Jacqueline DeLong's foreword. You've got the questions: our living educational theory of knowledge, transcending colonising influence, and most of the ones for December 2013 are with the I questions. But that is the latest issue. The next one is out in June, and you'll be able to access, as I say, at the end of June, this Educational Journal of Living Theories. But what I'd really like you to access, if you could, and that is the 2013 issue. If you remember, for the 2013 issue, it's a multimedia issue. Now, I've been critical of the academic journals because they're consistently only in words. If you look at the way academic theories are presented, it goes back to the time of Aristotle gaining control of the academy. Aristotle eliminated contradiction from correct thought, and the Greek culture and the knowledge that you've influenced the world with actually still holds to that logic of eliminating contradictions. Videotapes of my own practice that I took when I was a head of science in a school showed that I existed as a living contradiction. I could see I believed in inquiry learning. It was the videotapes that showed me I was giving my pupils the questions. I thought I got my pupils asking the questions. The videotape showed that I hadn't. However subtly, I was giving them the questions. The videotape, as I was very embarrassed as I saw myself denying the values that I hold. But that experience of being a living contradiction, holding to a value, negating it at the same time, made me challenge the old Greek theory of knowledge based on the Aristotle elimination of contradiction. And you'll see in the December 2013 issue of eJolts, lots of video being used to show people existing as living contradictions, not as a fault, but they generally didn't know, but then going into the action reflection cycle to improve their practice. With videotapes of their students and themselves, over time, showing what it is to live their values more fully. So I do hope you'll go into the 2013 issue of eJolts, because it will bring in values which I believe you would not expect a university to actually accredit. I'll give you the key example. I'm guessing that if you give me just an indication of timing when you want me to finish, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Now, this is really vital, because I'll guarantee each person in this room, at times in your professional life, and also at home, understand what it is to love what you are doing. Now, just hold on to that. Now, that love, and I hope you can feel that I do love what I do. So as I'm here with you, I'm feeling energized because of the invitation to come to share ideas that I believe in. I'm loving what I'm doing. An academic standard of judgment very rarely accepts, universities very rarely accept love as an academic standard. Now, one of my students was the first one at the University of Bath to have love at work as a title for her doctoral thesis. And love actually comes as an academic standard of judgment. It motivates me to do what I do. I think it will motivate you in terms of what you're doing in education. And you'll see in the 2013 issue that love and being loved into learning is a central value. A central standard of judgment that the videotapes explain with master students and their supervisor what the master students meant when they said to their supervisor, "We feel loved into learning." And that has been part of their master's dissertations. So don't hesitate to bring your passionately held values as explanatory principles into your informal knowledge that you make public and share to gain accreditation. Yes?
Do we switch this on?
Please.
I just wanted to confirm a little bit about where this is and where this is going. From what I see, from what you have to contribute on the net, it's like a brainstorm, if you like, of everybody's thoughts and experiences of their in education. And I see that eventually this will have to be conceptualised, and without throwing out original theory, these concepts will become a structure that can be communicated generally, because a random brainstorm is quite a difficult animal to deal with. And so at some point there'll be some kind of fundamental theory drawing from that, particular concepts, prepositions joining those concepts. And I just wondered, sometimes within that, there may be some wrong thinking as well.
Yeah.
And how are you going to accredit that and decide what?
Yeah, no, this is a crucial question. It motivated me to come to the University of Bath. 10 minutes, is it? University of Bath. I went in 73 because I've been studying with a philosopher, psychologist, sociologist about educational theory. And I was told that educational theory was made up of philosophy, psychology, sociology, and history of education. Right? That was educational theory. And explicitly, I was coming from the classroom in the East End of London teaching science. The two philosophers, that was Richard Peters, Paul Hurst, actually made this commitment to replace my practical principles with principles with more theoretical justification from the disciplines. Am I making sense here? That my practical principles, that I came as an educator, were to be replaced by the conceptual theories of the philosophy, psychology, sociology. Now that's what drove me to the University of Bath in 73. I was very happy as a science teacher until I saw that the educational theory that the universities were communicating was fundamentally in error because it eliminated my knowledge as an educator. Now this is not to deny the value of some of those conceptual frameworks. I still value Habermas's work. I use it. I'll explain how you can access them. I use the work, wonderful work of Eric Fromm, the psychologist who developed the humanistic ethics. But what I now reject is the idea that your knowledge as educators can be communicated within the conceptual theories of the disciplines of education. Now this isn't to say don't use those, but it is to say that you'll provide coherence for your explanation of your educational influence through the unique constellation of values that you use to give meaning and purpose to your life. They are unique to you. You can communicate those in a narrative, which is an explanation of your influence, and could include your love for what you do, your passion for social justice, your desire for freedom, as well as others to do with considering interest, respect, compassion, care. Are you with me with this? That this is who you are, I believe, in terms of your uniqueness. And it doesn't deny showing how you value theoretical frameworks, like the sociologists, like globalization. If you look at the economic theories at the moment of globalization, saying that a lot of our problems are being caused by huge inequalities of wealth around the world. And the banking crisis that you suffered from is actually influenced all our lives, and therefore bring in an economic analysis that enables you to show why it's influencing what you do in education. But do not, are you okay with this? Yeah?
Yes, I was just going to say that as a sort of simplest way to see it is the difference between Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics. That step, that encompasses more.
Very much, very much. That the Newtonian physics, which I studied, was all about causal determinism. Everything had that kind of mechanical cause. You are not that kind of entity. You're driven by values which are intentional. Now, you had a very important point about validity. How do you check the validity? And you'll see in my keynote and the notes that I show you how we develop validation groups of between 3 to 8 people, peers like yourselves, that you submit your explanations from your classrooms to. And you ask these 4 questions. And they're all on my notes, so you don't need to make a note of this. One is about comprehensibility. Am I making sense? The other is the traditional positivist one. Have I sufficient evidence to back up the claims I make? The third one, no positivist researcher, as I used to be, because I did a physics and science degree, has to answer this one, which is to do with the socio-historical and socio-cultural influences that are on your practice. And each group that I talk to around the world has got a very different influence on them that they need to acknowledge. I've just seen a paper from South Africa that doesn't acknowledge the new constitution in 1994 with Ubuntu written into the title. If you Google Ubuntu, Nelson Mandela can come up, and it's all about I am because we are. It's a real passion for community relations. If you're in South Africa and you don't even mention this, something vital is missing. So this idea of your socio-historical, socio-cultural context in Cyprus, which is a fascinating history, with influences on you, needs bringing into your explanation. And the fourth one, these all come from modifications of Habermas's ideas in communication and the evolution of society. The fourth one is your authenticity. This is what drove me into the universities, actually. It was the recognition that the academics were not actually producing an authentic explanation of my practice, whilst at the same time claiming that they would replace my values and principles with theirs. And authenticity is Habermas's 4th criteria, and we say, look, are you showing as fully as possible you're living the values that you're truly committed to as fully as possible in your practice? Now, I think this would then help to answer Yasmina's point about how do you actually make public, in a validated way, so it can be accredited, the knowledge that you have as educators. And that was a superb question. Thank you for that question, because that's what drove me to the university. To answer it, yes, Yasmina.
What you're saying is very interesting, but I can't help but think that people in this room are teachers and head teachers, and they're probably wondering how they get started. From what you're saying is that we need to acknowledge our values. It seems like it all comes back to values, right? Before we can actually get into an inquiry.
No, sir. Okay.
Maybe I got that wrong, but if, let's say, I work in a school and I want to get into the road towards school improvement, do I start sharing my living educational theory with others, or do I get to share my values with others before we actually commit ourselves into improvement?
Okay. The answer is no, okay, to both of those. What I'm suggesting you start with is what I think you've already started with, possibly, and that is your action reflection cycle. That this is a cycle that you'll see, you can access from my keynote and the notes in the PowerPoint. And again, I might have to read this because it might not be big enough for you, but the action reflection planner is, right, what do I want to improve? So you get together in your schools, sometimes it's individuals do this, other times groups of you can actually share this and meet regularly. So you actually share what you want to improve. You imagine how you're going to do it and create an action plan. You actually act on that, but as you're acting, you gather some data to make a judgment about whether you're being effective in the learning of your students or colleagues or pupils. And then you evaluate your effectiveness and modify that in the light of your values and understandings to see whether or not you're living your values as fully as possible. Now that is how you start. You get your action research going with that action reflection planner. And this is, I was shown this in 1976 by a group of 6 teachers I worked with over 18 months. This is how they showed me they improved their practice, going through that action reflection planner. Are you okay with this? Because you need support inside the school. You can do it individually, but it's very difficult. You're far better if you can get a small group of you actually doing this work, meeting regularly. I would say once every 2 to 3 weeks. Don't let it go longer than that because you can get data overload. You share your explanations with each other about whether you're influencing the practice. You ask your colleagues to ask you those 4 questions, and you'll see those in my notes. You know, how do I improve the comprehensibility? How do I strengthen the evidence? Can I show how I'm influenced by the normative background, that is the social system that I'm in? Am I being authentic in living my values as fully as possible? You can help each other practically with these questions. And this is how I would say you get started. What I showed in Canada was how important it was to get the ministry, and in particular the funding, for release time for the teachers, to actually be able to get together with an event where they actually showed how they were getting on. And they did this once every 6 months. But that's where the network of support is very important. But the bedrock is your desire to improve your practice. How do I improve what I'm doing? Get this action reflection going, and what I'm claiming you'll find is that as soon as you start to explain your influence, your educational influence in the learning of your students, you'll have to bring in your values, because your values are your explanatory principles. And then it becomes very exciting as each of you try to help each other to live your values more fully in what it is you're doing. Are you okay with that, Yasmina? Right, we've got 1 minute. Is it?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Is that okay, Yasmina? But don't hesitate, as I say. And afterwards, or email, you've got access to my email. And you must do, please, connect with, not only myself, but there is a global network of action researchers, all trying to improve their practice. And you'll see how to access some of these conversations that are going on in my notes and at the end of the PowerPoint. But please, do access this. As I say, actionresearch.net, it's all up there with all of these other resources. Any final questions before I pack in? Yeah?
If you could just summarize the 3 most important conclusions of your 40 years
Παρακαλώ
experience.
χρησιμοποιήστε το μικρόφωνο γιατί δεν μπορεί να γίνει μετάφραση.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Dr. Whitehead, if you could just summarize the 3 most important conclusions of your 40 years experience in action research, what these would be?
Yeah.
And how do you overcome at the beginning of the whole effort the syndrome of perfectionism? How do you persuade everybody that only that do not need improvement? As the American professor Riggs mentions in an article I read some years ago.
Okay, the 3 most important things. First of all, trust yourselves that you have important knowledge in what you do as educators to share it with others. That's the first step. Ask your own questions, how do I improve what I'm doing? But trust the fact that you have important knowledge to share. That's one. The second one is, I would say, engage in the action reflection cycles to show systematically that you're improving your practice. That is, you know, I've got a concern, what am I going to do? Okay, how am I going to do it? Gather some data, act, and evaluate. That's the second. The third one is gather your validation group of 3 to 8 people to share your explanations of influence so that you can be helped to improve the validity of the knowledge that you're making public. Those are the 3 things. And sorry, the last question was about perfection, was it? Or, in other words, I have never ever met anybody that I've worked with believes they are perfect. The videotapes, believe me, they will always show that you've got room for improvement. So the notion of perfection, it might be a driving passion to try to become perfect. But for me, if I'm becoming better, that is what is satisfying me. You see, I really don't have a notion of perfection. But I really do feel I understand what it is to improve my tactics. Are you okay with that? Yes, are we okay now? But don't hesitate to get back. And as I say, many thanks indeed for inviting me to share some ideas with you. Yes, thank you.